All right, we have special guests with us today. One of them's Baby Yoda.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
If you're not watching on video, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, it's
but
fine.
yeah. No, we've got two buddies of ours that we've done ministry with and we've known for a while. And a lot of times when we're preparing for episodes, we even collaborate with them and get their opinions on things. So, and they also make social media content of their own. So this is Luke and Rene, and I'll
Welcome
let
to
them.
Behind the Curtain, guys.
We'll share their information on our podcast page, so you can go follow them if you wish. If they say something that impresses you today, no pressure, guys. Luke actually,
on now.
This is the first time Luke has been in front of the camera for us, but he
Ah.
actually has helped us with a couple episodes.
Yep.
I still remember that first one.
Yep.
Yeah. We had like a dry run and a pilot, and Luke was there for both of those. That first one was bad. No one will ever hear that.
No. Oh, I remember. Yeah. Dude,
It's
I
all
took.
good.
It was so
Well,
much
actually,
work
I
putting
heard
up the
about
mic and everything. Yeah. Dude, the room was so cramped, dude. It was.
Yeah. We had the smallest possible room. We shoved a table in there, hooked up two mics.
Good times. So here we are a year later talking about, what are we talking about tonight, Ryan?
Yeah, we are talking about extraterrestrials.
It's
going to be interesting,
bro.
So this is the trendy thing to do right now, man. We're hopping on the bandwagon, and
that's what people want to hear, man.
Here's the thing: if you guys have listened, not you guys, Luke and Rene, but our audience that has stuck with us for a while, that you've listened to the past 20 episodes, you probably know already how Josh and I feel about aliens. We're not I would call myself skeptical a little bit, but we're open to it. We enjoy discussing it. We enjoy speculating and stuff. And as always, we'll have kind of a practical note at the end of this, but a lot of people are making videos and content right now, especially Christians, that are saying like, hey, in light of all the congressional hearings and things that are going on, all the whistleblowers coming out and Navy footage and all this stuff, what's the Christian response to it? And our audience is Christian, so that's why we're doing this. But what does it mean theologically? What does it mean as Christians? And so we also, you guys probably get tired of just listening to me and Josh rant about stuff, so we brought these guys on to give us maybe a more well-rounded,
to hear their rants.
Yeah, y'all may have complaints and concerns that Josh and I have not thought about. So, no, in all seriousness, it's going to be fun, and looking forward to what you guys have to say. So let's just rip the Band-Aid right off and start by asking aliens, what are they? I mean, are they real?
Let's answer the only question that we don't know.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. We can wrap this episode up real quick. But no, I think the more accurate way to say it is, should Christians believe in aliens? Because a lot of people feel very strongly about this. A lot of people will say, and Josh and I've addressed this before, there's no such thing as aliens. They're demons, or they're angels, or they're spirits, or whatever. And we try to fit it in this like Christian box, right? That this lens, and so some people say it's only demons, and some people say that's not even real, right? But anyway, so the whole alien thing, I feel like everybody has a different definition, and it might be fun to talk about that for a second. Just what do you think of with aliens, and what should Christians think about it? How should we kind of approach that?
Luke, you go first.
I love it. Let's do it.
Renee's like, I'm gonna wait to see what Luke says.
I know.
Yeah, dude, I think it's one of those things where I really think the important question is, man, is your faith shaken when we're hearing about all this stuff coming out about aliens? I think that's more so the question that we should be really answering. And as I was kind of thinking and praying, and just as all this stuff was kind of happening, we just don't know with everything. But I can say, I think the verse that kind of I would like to reference is Romans 8:38-39, and it kind of just seals it up for me. It's kind of like the be all end all kind of for me. But it says, "For I'm convinced that neither death nor life nor angels nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Ultimately, our existence is to be loved by the Lord, to fellowship with God. And so if nothing else can separate that, I'm not really that honestly concerned about all the other stuff. It's fascinating. I'm not saying we shouldn't look into this stuff and we shouldn't question this stuff and we shouldn't ask others about this stuff, but it's not really something that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
Great answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I mean, that's a good point. I think that's which is what we're saying. What should Christians think about it? I think a lot of people are scared that if, like, say there were irrefutable evidence to drop right now, like we all got an email that said, "Here it is, man. Here's an alien right here. He's standing in front of the White House shaking Biden's hand." You know, what would that mean for Christianity, right? And a lot of people are like, what does that do to our faith, or what does that do to our belief? And the truth is, it doesn't do much. You know, there are things that are, there are, like you said, where it says nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. There are absolute statements in the Bible, and that would include even things we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good grounded foundational verse to go to. That it doesn't matter what comes up. We're always, our faith is in Christ, and even if there is something that's created we don't know about or haven't seen or never heard of, like that doesn't matter. It's not going to affect my faith in any way, or it shouldn't. I think the problem that certain Christians have with the alien topic seems to be people that are like very almost like how Heiser talked about how inspiration, the doctrine of inspiration is, and like people that if it's not in the Bible, then it doesn't exist or something, or like Alberino talks about, it's like there's no quantum mechanics in the Bible, so I don't know. I think it's just those people that have like a very narrow view of like, okay, the Bible is all there is. If it's not in there, then it doesn't exist. And so when something pops up that's not referenced in the narrative of Scripture, they freak out and malfunction. And but I love what Alberino says. He's like, dude, like just because something's not in the Bible, that doesn't mean anything. Like the Bible is a specific message about Christ and the gospel. All the other things that are in this world that we experience, it might not be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Josh, that's very good. I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about it's just funny because I could see myself from whenever I was, an infant in Christ, pursuing Jesus, and now where I am now, I think like 14, 15 years later, I forgot when I got saved, but anyways, somewhere along that line. And I remember when I was, a baby in the faith, I didn't really want to tackle this issue at all. I didn't want to tackle it because I was still learning about the faith. I was still learning about the Bible. But I also had that worldview that, man, if the Bible doesn't say anything about it, then I can't believe it. Like everything that the Bible says, that's it. And again, I'm not saying that, the Bible's not authoritative and is not the written word of God. Again, I'm not saying that it's not true. That's not what I'm saying. But as I got older and I went to Bible college and everything, I started to see that, you know, when people, or especially atheists, whenever they try to come at the Bible from a scientific lens, they say, well, because scientifically this can't happen, so that means the Bible is not true. But what they fail to realize is that the Bible is not a science book. You know, the Bible is not a mathematic book, right? You're not going to go in and see a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Like you're not going to go to the Bible because that's not the context of the Bible. So as I started to learn more and more about the Bible and the context of it, it started to help me grow in my faith because I started to realize that, you know what? Like, even though that the Bible doesn't say it, that doesn't mean it's not real. Because even if they are real, let's just throw a big if right now, because we're just starting this. But let's just say, even if they are real, that doesn't hinder my faith anymore because I know that my God's a big God. And if they are real, then I know that the God that I serve, Yahweh, made them as well. So I would just say, like, for Christians who are trying to like navigate this issue, you have to be honest with yourself and assess, like, man, where am I in my faith? Am I mature enough to look at the evidence and the facts and to study it, or am I not mature enough? because I decided whenever I was younger that I wasn't mature enough. So I just said, you know what? I'm just not even going to talk about it. I'm not even going to research it. When the time will come, the time will come. So I think you also have to just be honest with yourself. And then also just to piggyback on what Luke was saying, because I love that verse, because like literally nothing can separate us from the love of God. That's the verse you said, right, Luke? Okay,
Pretty
I'm just
much
making sure that I'm quoting stuff right. I ain't quoting
same stuff.
heresy.
Yeah.
but one of the scriptures that came to my mind was in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, where it says, the foundation has already been built. No one can build on any other foundation. That foundation is Jesus Christ. So overall, it's like my foundation's on Jesus. No matter what's thrown my way, no matter what new philosophical thing is thrown my way, because just like what Paul talks about, like, man, my foundation is built on Jesus Christ and the Word of God. So this whole UFO and UAP things, it's not frightening. It's cool. Like, I want to learn and kind of expand my mind and pray and ask the Lord, like, okay, God, like, how should I respond to this? But I'm not like throwing it away or tossing it to the side because the Bible doesn't say alien. Like the modernized word, the English word of an extraterrestrial. So
Yeah. If anything, I almost see it as an opportunity to speak with people about the Bible and about Christianity that might not have been open to it before. And that's something I've been learning, the Josh and I've talked about it the whole time we've done this podcast, because we like talking about the weird things in the Bible. But there are things, like you said, I wouldn't even try to address. Aliens was one of them when I was younger in the faith. And I had friends that were like, oh, maybe they're real. And I was kind of scared. It's like, I don't know, man. There can't be aliens because it doesn't fit in my theology. But I can think of a ton of people who, kind of like what we've talked about, like with Enoch and the flood and the gods of the nations, using Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers and seeing what the ancient world thought about the heavens, and maybe what went on up there, or even under the earth, what's hiding under the earth and in the sea and all that. Because I don't know if y'all caught that. They say that there's aliens in the sea too. There's not just
Yeah,
UFOs in the air.
USOs. Those are
Wild.
yep,
unidentified
underwater
submersible,
Yep, that's right.
submersible objects. Yep.
Yeah, dude.
Yes,
But
I
man,
did. I heard that.
I really could see that. Like, if anybody, let me make it real easy for any of y'all. If you're listening to this and you're saying, I struggle sharing my faith, go ask somebody what they think about aliens and then start telling them about Genesis 6, Genesis 11,
Bro. Okay, that's a good launching pad right there. Is okay. Let's talk about what are aliens? What gathering the evidence, for I would say since the beginning of time, but at least in America in the past 70, 80 years, what was it since I mean, people have been speculating about the modern day definition of aliens for a long time. Even C.S. Lewis wrote a space trilogy back in the 1930s and 40s that dealt with
Yeah.
aliens and creatures from other planets. But let's talk about let's speculate a little bit. Now, when we speculate, we want to. Ryan, I love the way you put this one time. It's like putting a pin in a board and you have a string connected. So that pin is the gospel, and that string can kind of move all around here, but that pin keeps us anchored. Uh, Anchored in Christian theology, let's speculate on what could these things be.
Yeah. So
Not
this
what
is,
are they? We don't know what they are yet. But
yeah.
what could they be? What are
So
the
we're saying
possibilities?
You go first.
Christians shouldn't be
Yeah.
afraid of this topic. So
I love it.
assuming aliens are real, what do you think they are?
Right.
Dude, so growing up, when I heard about, aliens and whatnot, for a while it was definitely like I just dismissed it. But when I actually started thinking about it, I guess some of my initial thoughts were I think that it was some kind of like just demonic force, maybe demons that just can shapeshift. And I mean, we don't know a whole lot about that realm anyway. So, I mean, who knows what it could be that. But I think as time goes on and whatnot, I'm also thinking this could very well be technology that is maybe deeply rooted somewhere in the government, like secret operations and whatnot. So it could be a plethora of things, and it could be both. Maybe we got that technology from maybe other entities, and really, who knows? But
So is your
interesting to
opinion,
think
are you
about.
saying you think it's human? The stuff is made by humans and they're trying to pass it off as extraterrestrial?
Possibly, I mean, who knows? I mean, who's to say not? I guess.
Well,
So
that's why we're
I think
doing
it
this,
goes
because
both
who
ways.
knows?
Yeah.
That's right. Who knows?
Well, it's interesting that you said maybe they're getting technology from these aliens. Like how did we get our iPhone? How did we? How did we jump
Like
so
I don't know. Yeah,
fast in
exactly.
technology from horse
Dude,
and buggy, and now we're flying across the world in planes?
my dad, all growing up, my dad has been a big Star Trek fan. I mean, when I was a kid, The Next Generation was on TV. And he used to say every time something would come out, like the cell phones and you know, when we started having USB, drives and all this stuff, every time some big advancement or some new thing would come out, he'd be like, Gene Roddenberry made this up 20 years ago.
Captain
He
Kirk
knew.
had one of them on his
Yeah.
belt.
He's like, Gene Roddenberry was a genius. So
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes into like Hollywood has been talking about aliens for a long time,
yeah, yeah. And there's CIA
and there's CIA
involved.
informing
Yes.
Hollywood
So
Oh,
to
this
really?
push
goes
I
back
had no
narratives.
to,
Oh
idea.
yeah, to
yeah,
push narratives. And
we
what we're
have,
talking about is the church trials. If you go on YouTube, you can search the church trials. This is during the 1970s, I believe. They put the CIA basically on trial, and
yeah,
Church was the name of one of the senators that started all this, and they flat out said the CIA was like, yes, we have people in journalism, we have people on the payroll that are in Hollywood to basically to push narratives in a certain way, especially in favor of our three-letter agencies. But that was all confirmed, so none of that's conspiracy.
right. So going along with what Luke just said, and we've said on the show before that I think Hollywood is a big psyop. I think a lot of it is predictive. I think what they call predictive programming, right? So something like Star Trek or some spy movie, whatever, where they have these gadgets. They could be planting that in our heads so that in the next 5-10 years, whatever, when you start seeing that, you go, oh cool, that's like the thing I saw on TV, man. It's
It's
you
kind of
know
like MK Ultra a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
very
I
much.
mean, hey, they have flying cars now, dude. They were preparing us for that, you know 20
We
years
still we
ago.
still don't have those correctly.
Yeah, they don't go very fast, but they actually have a working flying car now.
Dude, have you guys seen the
Yeah,
guy in like
it's not the flying cars that we want. It's like a plane with wheels. It's like, nah, that's not a flying car. It's got freaking wings coming off of it.
have y'all seen though the jetpack dude, the kind of like
The
Iron Man
jetpack
dude?
thing
Like
is
he has
cool. That's
With
Yeah.
the
wild.
yeah,
water,
it's
the
wild.
That's
water
wild.
thing,
No,
something
there's
like
another
that.
one that's like actually an
Like
Iron
Iron
Man.
Man.
I
It's
think I
like
seen
Yeah.
that like
he's
in the
got like
UK or
gauntlets on
something.
his arms, and it's like it blow, dude.
Okay,
It's
no, I haven't seen
it's
that.
crazy.
Yeah,
So
man.
I like to think that some of this technology comes from, if you want to say aliens, if you want to say demons or spirits or sons of God or Nephilim or whatever you want to say. Like I think a lot of that technology comes from. I mean, that's what Genesis 6 was. It was an exchange of technology and knowledge to humanity, and I think that maybe still goes down. Maybe I don't know. Maybe
But
we
do
got a lot of
you
our technology from the other side.
Yeah, before I ask this question, I think Renee was going to say something a second ago. Did you have something, or
Yeah.
I don't want to get off before I'm about to ask Josh
Yeah,
something
no,
about
no,
what
for
he just
sure,
said. So,
for sure. So just like the whole aliens thing, like what are they and everything, man. I've always flipped back and forth. I'm just being honest. I always flip back and forth to like, okay, they do exist, right? They are other biological beings, or no, they're not. They're just spirits, or they're demonic, or they're watchers, or no, they're, or government and other governments around the world are creating these things. And I was dying on the hill, like, which one is it? Is it this one, that one, or that one? But now I'm kind of to the place of, you know what? I'm settling on the fact that it could be all three.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not an
all of
either
them.
or, it's all of them encompassing together, because
Exactly.
I don't want to die on the hill and say it's either this one, and then now I'm biased on how I think. I'm biased in my worldview. I'm biased towards evidence. Now, yes. So with that, I think the things that we have been seeing, you know, I guess pretty current. Like that's what's going on in our country with the hearings and everything. I think it is like a extraterrestrial type thing, but I think right now the things that is really being highlighted is human technology, right? That's kind of where I'm leaning to right now. Like all the events that's been happening right now, I would say it's human technology, because if it wasn't human technology, then why would like the military, like contractors like Raytheon would get so upset with these people for coming out? So yeah, so that's just kind of what I wanted to say. I don't think it's either this one, that one, or that one. I think it's all of them. And I think, some people might disagree and just say that it is straight spirits, because I've seen other people, other Christian content creators, making videos about this. And some people are like, no, because the Bible doesn't say anything about aliens. It's demonic, because we can see it in the scriptures that they do shapeshift, or like how angels can, come into human form and so forth. So it is a spiritual thing. It's a demonic. And I've seen people in the comments, like Christians, like saying, thank you so much. That's 100% correct. I'm 1,000% agreeing with you. And again, that's on them. But this whole conversation in general, I would say, should never divide the church. It shouldn't come to a point where it's dividing the church. I think it should bring more unity, because again, this going back to like what Luke said, that none of this can separate me from the love of God. And overall, as Christians, my foundation is built upon Jesus Christ. And I think what we're seeing here, I don't think this is a big rock in theology where this is going to affect my salvation. Like there are big rocks in theology, that in doctrine, that we all need to agree on, right? Like Jesus is the sinless Son of God, right? He's 100% man, 100% God, and came and died for our sins. Like those types of things we all got to be in agreement with. But like, hey, was it a literal? I'm just throwing this out here, right? I'm probably going to open a can of worms, but was it a literal 6-day creation, or was it not? The whole theme of the whole creation story is not to say that there are a literal, set like 6-day creation. Is just to show that there's a creator who created people and created everything that we know today. So I think this is a smaller rock, but I love the conversations that we're having, because I think as Christians, man, sometimes we don't want to have conversations.
Yeah.
Or I don't even say Christians, just our whole culture, you don't want to have conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as dialogue. There's no such thing as healthy communication and healthy, like, man, can we just exchange some thoughts here? Can I have the space and the freedom to express my idea without being attacked and verbally
Right.
abused and slandered and all this stuff? So I love the fact that you guys invited us to have this conversation, because I think conversations like this should bring Christians more into unity than division.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole iron sharpens iron thing is there for a reason. Like,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a little bit of sparks flying, when you got two metal swords banging together, but it makes you
True.
sharper. Right.
Well, and that's the thing. This is something Christians are allowed to disagree on. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying. Like if you tell me Jesus
Yes.
isn't God and he didn't die for humanity, then I'd be like, okay, you're a
Right.
heretic.
That's
But
I'm
if
gonna
you
look at
tell
him
me,
like this.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to say I think Rene fits in real well in the show, because that's what we always say is it can be both.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. That's
why
one of our-
limit
yeah.
why limit your paradigm and maybe go into some kind of fault or error, or close the door on someone who may receive the gospel if you're open to discussion about a certain topic.
Dude,
So
I'm so glad you said this. I just thought about this. So sorry for cutting you off, but I remember whenever I was 13, and that's when I became saved. Or I started following the Lord at that age, and I remember I was so interested in like the spiritual realm, especially this book thing called Bill Wise, 23 Minutes in Hell, or something like that. I forgot the dude's name, but it was a book called 23 Minutes in Hell. I saw it on TBN, and I'm watching all these different, like the super, like Sid Supernatural. Like I'm watching all this stuff because I was interested and I was trying to like figure it out. So I remember I was talking to my mom, and of course, she'll give me the book. I mean, she didn't give it. She actually bought me the book, and I was starting to read because I wanted to know about hell, heaven, and the supernatural. But then as I got older, and then I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this, like even getting interested in like ghosts and spirits, and trying to like just figure all this out. Like, how does this fit in the Bible? And I remember maybe man, maybe when I became a junior or a senior in high school, me and my mom started to have these conversations again about the things when I was 13. And I asked her, I was like, Mom, like, did you really like agree with anything that I was saying or anything that I was bringing up to you about like the different possibilities or this person doing this and all this? She was like, you know, I didn't agree with everything that you said, and honestly, I didn't really want you to read like that 23 minutes in hell book because I didn't think, it was right for you in that moment. But she said, but the reason why I entertained the conversations, the reason why I was willing to, watch some of these shows with you, the reason why I was getting some of these books for you, because I saw the greater purpose that this was helping you draw closer to God because everything that you were looking for was going back to the Bible. You wasn't straying away from the Bible. Because my mom even said, she's like, yeah, Renee, I don't believe in ghosts like what you was watching on like Ghost Whisperer and all this type of stuff. I don't agree with any of that. She's like, I think they're spirits, but I noticed when you was watching and bringing all these things up, you will always bring it back to the Bible. You always went back to the Word of God. You went back to like try to figure out what the Bible says. So that really ministered to me because my mom didn't hinder my development and what God was trying to use in that moment to help me draw closer to him. She actually aided and assisted that. So man, I think that ties into exactly what you were saying, Ryan. Like we can't, you know, just limit ourselves. And again, we always have to walk in wisdom, like parents, like whatever. We always got to walk in wisdom, and that's what my mom felt like the Lord was doing. So she just took those steps. And again, she said she didn't agree with everything, but she saw that it always brought me back to the Word of God.
That's
So
good, man. That's good. And that's one of the reasons why I think Josh and I are very comfortable talking about this. When I started getting into Michael Heiser's material, a lot of people accuse him of being a Gnostic and a heretic and all kinds of stuff because he talks about the divine council and, um, you know, but one of the things after studying that material and the ancient Near East context and the reading the Bible in context and all that, I found that the gospel message was never compromised in what he teaches. And after studying the material he put out, I found that I was more excited to study the Bible and share the gospel with people. And I was like, if this were the devil, I don't think I would want to talk to people about this. I don't think the devil's going to encourage somebody to share the gospel.
that's so true. Your flesh, your mind, and Satan would never want you to go out and share the good news with people. So yes, that is correct.
Honestly, when you really get down to the nitty gritty things of all of these things that we're talking about, yeah, it's being open minded, but it's about asking questions. I think if we're afraid to ask these questions and to dive into these maybe uncertain realms, I think that could actually be more a stumbling block than anything. Because imagine you're just sheltered with this, I guess, maybe theology that you've been boxed in with for so long. You're not exploring any questions. I mean, you think about this stuff all the times, like when let's just say um, someone they grew up Christian in the household, but then they go to a secular college. How many times does this happen where a professor they say something or and whatnot, and then that person they just completely turn away from Christ because really they never were asking themselves questions like these things, and so yeah, this is definitely like an encouragement to just continue to ask questions, even if it seems weird, even if it can get uncomfortable. That's good because the more that you're uncomfortable, the more that you're growing, the more that you can say, you know what, I have this history with God, and again, like what y'all were saying, it's pointing me back to Christ, and so man, I love it. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, man. Ask Josh how he feels about being too dogmatic. He's shared that a couple times.
Bro, it gets you in trouble, man. It gets you in trouble, and then it ruins your faith because, like you were saying about these kids going to colleges and they're raised in these sheltered Christian homes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you do a disservice to kids when you don't teach them and talk plainly with them, and you shelter them and you keep them away from so many things, and then when they go out in the world, they lose their minds because they don't have anything to process. Their parents should instill that in them before they get out in the world. But and I think we're harping on that a lot, but it's good that our paradigms need to be really big. And we always go back to that little pin. The anchors is the gospel and Jesus. But man, like me coming out of the Calvinist camp, like being dogmatic and all that stuff is good with essentials. But when you get when you start attacking each other over the stuff that doesn't really matter in the long run, it's so not good. Uh, and this is one of those topics, where we have a lot of freedom to roam around.
When Luke was talking about questions, I thought about this. And Josh, I'm glad you said this because there was a time in my life too where I was afraid of some questions because I felt like it would stray like me away from Christ. But as I matured in the faith, I realized that, man, God is not afraid of my questions. I need to ask, right? But I also came to understanding that every question that I ask, I might not get the answer that I'm looking for, and that's okay. And sometimes that answer is you don't need to know. And that's where the Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 comes in, where it says, just trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and all your paths will be straight. So I just wanted to say, I'm like, God is not afraid of our questions. We shouldn't be afraid of questions, but we also have to just be okay with, what? I have to come to an understanding that I might not always understand.
I love that too, because you think about that's the whole point of Proverbs too. Is like seek wisdom, guard it, and dude,
Yeah, not
oh
run away
man,
from it.
Which
yeah.
brings us full circle back to our topic because you're never going to know what aliens are. I mean,
Not
well,
yet.
well, until they show up, right? Uh,
But okay, so we were talking earlier today, Ryan, me, you, and Renee. Luke, I don't know where you were, uh, but we were talking about this topic, and we were kind of, shooting it around, and the idea of this connecting to the Bible, that these alien beings, if they are, I mean, there's people that report them being flesh and blood creatures, and I mean, the reports are all over the place. It's a spectrum of wildness. There's some aliens that look like humans. There's some aliens that look like insects. There's some that seem ethereal. There's some that seem fleshly. Some speak, some don't, and it's like it's all over the place. So I like that what you said earlier, Renee. It's like it's probably all of it. It's demons. It's spirits. It's ghosts. It's maybe fleshly aliens that are from another dimension or planet. Who knows? Let's entertain all of it. So when we do figure out what it is, we don't lose our minds and we're like, oh my God, this I never thought of this before. But we were connecting it to something that we love to talk about on the show, Ryan. The infamous Genesis 6
oh yeah, can't
and
imagine where you're
how
going with this.
yeah, and Enoch, and it seems like everything in our world comes back to this narrative and this starting point.
So see, this is where everyone's watching the show, and I'm sure that we're mostly going to get people that agree with us, but we're going to have some skeptic on there that thinks it's only demons, and they're going to be like, "The Book of Enoch isn't in the Bible,"
Ah,
I can already see the comments. We are not saying the Book of Enoch should be in the Bible. We will say that it informed the biblical authors, that it's
oh yeah,
valuable culturally and historically, and it expounds on this Genesis 6 narrative, and it tells us what kind of things were going on in those first 8 verses of Genesis 6 before we get to Noah's flood. So one of the things is this idea of there being hybrid children, right? The Nephilim. They're giants, they're mighty men, they are so they're half divine being and half human being, right?
Hercules.
Yeah, like
exactly, yeah,
Hercules, a demigod.
exactly.
So, uh, what's the guy's name? Schneebly?
Oh, Schnabelin, yeah.
Here's where a lot of people have a problem with. I've heard several explanations for how angels would have children with humans, and one of them is ritual, which we've explained a little bit. This idea of sympathetic magic of ritual practice. We've discussed that, so that's an option. One is maybe that they were genetically modified humans or something. But if you believe that angels literally copulated with humans, the question is always, how do angels who don't have human bodies as we know ha- have have that kind of relationship with a woman? And this guy said that there is a belief in the occult that the angels had to drink human blood to shapeshift into humans, that they had to consume human blood, which then you could say, well, that makes sense because there are laws against consuming blood because of ritual pagan
Ritual
practices. And
purposes. Yeah.
yeah, so there's this idea that they took on human forms because they consumed blood. Now let me get my Jesus message in here. Jesus, who did not have a human father, he's fully God and fully man, gave his blood for humanity. Hallelujah. Right? He did not come to destroy. So
Right.
anyway, all right, there you go. Got that out.
But it ties in with the idea. We had this idea when it came to like the dinosaur
Right,
episode. That
right.
like maybe these divine sons of God weren't just messing with humans. Maybe they were messing with whether it was sexually or
In a lab,
technologically,
yeah.
right? Something like that. Yeah.
Or
Uh,
witchcraft,
I mean, they right witchcraft, sorcery, magic. What if they were tampering with stuff and creating things that could turn out to be
chimeras and
aliens, or
yeah.
you know, because
Yeah,
they were
so
flesh and blood creatures, but like the Nephilim were flesh and blood.
yeah.
But now
They were
there's
GMO'd.
right, yeah. but now, but now they're disembodied and they're unclean spirits. The New Testament talks about unclean spirits. There's a reason they're called unclean spirits, because they were the unclean sanction of
And
that.
why they're looking for bodies too. Why do unclean
Exactly.
spirits
Why they're
possess
possessing
people?
people. Exactly.
Yeah.
They crave that flesh. And so it could tie in to that narrative
I was
biblically.
gonna say too. I mean, you think about all these alien abductions. I mean, we don't know like a lot about like what's going on actually like in those instances, but I mean, it could be some kind of demonic sexual like ritual or we just really don't know what that
Right,
stuff
right.
is, but
Yeah. So there actually is, this is actually something you can go and look up. If I find a source, I'll post it. We can post it on Instagram. But something that you can find is there is a correlation between UFO sightings and like alien abductions, these experiences. There's a correlation between that and places where um, a majority of the population or many people in this population practice witchcraft. And so
oh,
I was listening to an interview with Hugh
Hugh
Ross.
Ross, yeah.
Yeah, and he was saying places like Brazil or France. He said in America, Hawaii and Alaska, which I had no idea that was heavy in occult, I guess. But he said that there are places that have the highest UFO sightings, and they're also very steeped in occult practices. So Luke, I think there's something to that, and that's another connection to this Genesis 6 story, that when these angels, these watchers, defected, the book of Enoch, First Enoch says that they taught divination, they taught the paths of the stars and the cycles of the moon, and things like what we would call alchemy. That says the cutting of roots, and so they clearly, they taught humans to do these things. So it makes sense that now, as humans practice that, it might call to those spirits or access those spirits or something. There is a connection there, for sure, for sure. So, and that's something that's measurable. I find that interesting.
No, no, that's so true. It just made me think about in Deuteronomy where God was like, don't follow the practices and the uh of the Canaanites, and how they were big in astrology, and God even goes in specifically like what not to do. So, dude, that makes sense why, God doesn't want us to do astrology and all these other types of things because of where it came from. And and here here's another thing I was always thinking about. I'm like, okay, I know there are some things that God tells us not to do, and He gives us a reason why. There's some things God tells us not to do and doesn't even tell us why. And even like in astrology and like in that passage in Deuteronomy, He says, "Don't do this." And yes, He references because it's the culture that you're going into and in the land that you're going to possess. Like that's the reason why. But I think maybe one of the other reasons why God would say that, because if He told us what it actually was, because of our sinful nature, because of our flesh, we're more prone to evil than good. We're more prone to following sin than the spirit. So we would go like, oh, cool. that's like some type of demonic practice. Let me go experiment and try and see what he actually says. Just like this. Like that's why Hollywood makes horror movies. They don't make Holy Spirit movies. Like people want to be
That's
scared
that's
with
beautiful.
horror movies. I know that's super cheesy, but that was my thought. But it's true. Like that's why Hollywood makes horror movies and people love the scary movies. But if you do something about the Holy Spirit, he's gonna give you peace. Like that's whack. I ain't gonna go watch that. But so, anyways, with all that being said, I think that's one of the reasons why God also tells us not to do these things because of the ties and the thing that it's latched onto. And it speaks a lot of volumes what you said about the UFO encounters. Uh, those sightings and everything are really around where people are involved in witchcraft and occult practices.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I believe I've heard Dr. Laura Sanger say this before too. I can't remember if it was her or not, but that people who have alien or extraterrestrial encounters, whether it's an abduction story or a UFO sighting, there's two things that usually it follows a bloodline. It's usually all in the same family. Like children will see it if their parents or grandparents had this experience. But another thing is that they or their parents, someone in their family, um, practiced or like saw psychics and mediums and stuff like that. So that again, that's something that's measurable. There are people that have observed this. Maybe, like I said, I feel like I'm gonna have to go find a lot of resources to post after this, but I know I've heard Sanger or somebody say that before.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with like ghosts and hauntings and stuff too. It seems to follow.
Yeah. And a lot of, and this is kind of where the people who say extraterrestrials have to be demons, they can only be demons, which I want to clarify our language there when I say demon in just a second. Um, People who have already listened to our episode on that will know where I'm about to go. But when you do those things that are clearly not biblical, that are anti-God or anti righteousness, whatever, we've talked about the dichotomies of light and dark and chaos and order and stuff. When you go towards those things, you open doors to that. And I'm using like a super evangelical term here, so sorry if that offends you, but I don't know a better way to say it.
Open
You
a portal.
invite, yeah, you open a portal, but you invite those things into your life by, it's kind of like if I call somebody and they don't answer and I leave a voicemail, I expect them to call me back, and so you can't just go practice these things and not expect those things to come back to you.
Yeah. Well, you can't play with fire and believe not to be burned. Now, what about, I'll push back on that narrative of like the occult thing. What about people that do not practice the occult and they have these visitations or abduction experiences or see things, hear things? Because
Yeah, I'm
that's
not
going to
trying to make
be
a case for demons only.
right, right.
I am saying though that a lot of those experiences, abductions and UFO sightings, are connected to or even resemble demonic attacks. I mean, you have people that experience sleep paralysis and
Yeah, yeah,
nightmares and stuff like that. People who I do think that's something that happens, and this is what makes it hard to measure who's actually telling the truth about what. I think that there are people who have demonic experiences or experiences with unclean spirits, and they say it was an alien. You
yeah,
know, so that makes it hard to define. Well, like you asked, what if somebody isn't involved in any kind of occult or any kind of, even if it's innocent, like, oh, my horoscope or a palm reading one time when I was a teenager, you know, if someone has never done that in their life, I think I'd have to hear that story and take it case by case.
yeah, yeah.
So again, I'm not trying to close the door on there being alien beings. I'm just saying that it's possible that a lot of these people are describing spiritual experiences and because they don't know, because they're ignorant, or because they have some kind of bias, they don't want to identify it as a spiritual experience.
Right,
They'll
right.
say aliens or something like that.
Well, yeah, there's cases of witnesses that said they have gotten abducted, taken on to a craft, and that the aliens speak to them in some sort of way and give them an anti-Christian message that we're
Yeah.
all one and we're all connected with the universe and there is no divine and you're divine inside of you and all this like new age sounding stuff. But
Yeah,
then there
that
but then
which is
there's
another thing.
also right. Yeah, and then there's also people that come and say, they were stoic, they were like robotic, they didn't speak, they prodded around on my whatever and then dropped me off, and so there's like I just go back. There's such a spectrum, and that's what makes this topic very difficult. Is that it's all over the place, and you can't really pin it down in one secure way. It's kind of like that game whack-a-mole. Like you whack the mole, and then another mole pops
And
up
it
over
comes,
Yeah.
here.
yeah.
You hit that one, and like three more pop up over here. It's kind of like that.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
do think that just references the point. I think Renee, you were mentioning it, is that it's just and or it's both. It's probably
Right. It's all
amongst
the
all of
above.
these
Yeah.
different things, and so
Right. Well, and how could you
yeah.
know? I mean, a common, like atheist skeptics that say, well, there's no intelligent designer, there's no creator, there's no God, whatever. And then they say, give me proof. And then this is kind of a cop out, but as a Christian, my thing is like, what kind of proof do you expect me to give? If I'm
Yeah.
talking about something that's outside of space and time, you want me to like pull out a chemistry set and a microscope, or like, I don't know what, if I'm trying to describe something that's bigger than the universe that created all this, what kind of evidence do you expect for me to provide in a lab that's going to prove? Which I
Yeah.
have an answer for that, but we haven't made it to that yet.
Dude.
We'll get
Well,
there.
people like that,
That's
even if
good.
you did perform a miracle right in front of them, they'd still deny
They
it.
still
Oh, or
wouldn't
some
believe it.
kind of
Right,
like,
which is
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
whole
it
point.
was a
But
natural phenomenon.
I think it's important to recognize that in conversations like this, when we're talking about aliens, something that we really can't understand unless one showed up and said, yep, here's what I am. Here's my autobiography. By the way, we're trying to take over your planet.
Hey,
You
that
know,
could happen.
yeah, maybe so.
It might be headed
But
that way.
I think it was Luke, we were joking the other day about the Twilight Zone episode where they have
Oh yeah, yep.
to serve people, the book, and
To serve man, yeah.
to serve man. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Dude, what if
But
they're like robotic? What if they're like drones, like
yeah,
controlled, or if they do have bodies? I mean, what's stopping them from getting possessed by Nephilim spirits? And maybe that's why they come across as demonic, because they're possessed in some way. What if they're
I didn't think about that.
what if they're benign creatures and then they're somehow possessed by? I mean, if we're gonna get speculative here,
so
let's
you
get
think
crazy with it.
That's actually
that
very interesting.
the
Yeah, what if
Nephilim,
they're like controlled?
the disembodied Nephilim spirits couldn't find any host on Earth, so they went to Endor, got some Ewoks, came back.
They got some Chewbacca's.
Yeah.
Well, no. What if there's? I mean, there's aliens on our planet, maybe on Earth somewhere. So
Yeah.
especially these underwater ones.
Talking about reptilians.
Maybe just the underwater ones are the demons, and the ones in space are something else.
Well, I didn't get to do this a second ago, just so that I can clarify my definition, because I hear people say aliens are just demons. Josh mentioned this earlier when we talk on this podcast. Now, I'm not saying everybody, I'm saying on this podcast, we have clarified, we believe in the New Testament, when Jesus casts spirits out of people, those are unclean spirits because they're a mix of human and divine
Right.
biology
They're
or whatever.
abominations.
Right. They're unclean, okay? And that is the disembodied spirit of the Nephilim from the pre-flood world, okay? That's what we tend to, when we talk about, you'll hear us say unclean spirits. When we say demon, I know that we're typically referring to territorial spirits, this idea of the gods of the nations, because in Genesis 11, you can go listen to those episodes on Babel that we did. But the Jews, the Israelites had this idea, and you can read it in Deuteronomy. Moses talks about it in Deuteronomy, that the Lord split up the nations and turned them over to the gods, because the gods, the Elohim, or he calls them shades or shadim, because it gets translated in English as demon. It's like one of two times in the Old Testament, I think, that word gets used. I'll have to fact check myself on that.
Well, he divides them up against the other Elohim,
To
or
the other Elohim,
amongst
right?
the other Elohim, but then
The
gods are referenced as Shadin, which
right.
they
So
translate demon. But
the idea is that at Babel there was idol worship going on. Humans were rebelling against Yahweh. They were turning to other gods, and Yahweh said, "You know what? You like them so much, go be with them." And then he made Israel for himself. So that's what Deuteronomy 32 says, that he divided the nations among the sons of God, but Israel was his portion, or Jacob was his portion. And the Greeks and other cultures had the same thing. We talked about Plato before. Plato talks about the shepherds, the gods who ruled over the nations. So that's what we mean when we say demons. Now, the reason I clarify that is because we've talked about technology. Could spirits be giving people technology? Okay. So I don't think those spirits are going and possessing Ewoks, by the way. That's not what we mean. Okay. So
Ewoks are good. They're
yeah,
good.
not if they're possessed. There was a Sith Ewok, wasn't there?
They can't. No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
they're all on the
I'm
light
making that
side.
up. Maybe
Don't
that's like a fan fiction thing. I know I
don't
saw it
ruin my Star
somewhere.
Wars. Yeah,
I'm gonna find it. It's like a fan made thing, I think. But yeah, those gods, I think the gods from Genesis 6, the Watchers, they're in prison. I don't think they're in play right now.
they're in jail. Yeah,
They're in prison awaiting the day of judgment. That's what Jude says. But I think that the Genesis 11 gods of the nations and Deuteronomy 32 gods of the nations, I
they're
think they could
very at
still be
work.
in play.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's where we get these ideas of Zeus and Saturn and Jupiter and you know,
TikTok.
Apollyon and or yeah, TikTok. So
It's a false
anyway,
god.
they could be communicating with people. That could be when people are
Oh yeah,
taking
oh yeah.
what's the juice that all the Hollywood
LSD.
celebrities,
Oh,
not yeah, LSD, but no, ayahuasca, when they're
Oh,
on,
ayahuasca.
isn't
Yeah,
that it? Isn't that the tea that they drink?
where they go and trip in the
Yeah.
Amazon.
So people on LSD and stuff, they have these trips and they see these beings and they talk to them, and you know, they
Yeah, the Clockwork Elves.
I think that the gods of the nations are still in play. And so when you say, well, I think aliens are demons, that's what I would go with that. I'm not saying that's exclusive. I'm not saying there's not other creatures like Josh is saying, drones or whatnot. But like I think that those beings are still in play and they'll be judged, when Jesus returned. Well, they were judged when he resurrected. That's in Matthew, that's in the Gospels. But and Paul
They were
talks about that.
dethroned in their
Right,
regions. Yeah,
right. And when he says that we war against principalities, that's
yeah.
what he's talking about.
Those aren't
Territorial
demons.
spirits.
Those are
Right.
those are other gods
Yeah. Well, not
with
how we think
authority.
of demons.
Right.
When
Exactly.
when
Not New
Moses said
Testament
demon,
demons.
that's what he meant. So
Right.
so I think they could be communicating with people. Maybe they are getting technology. Maybe CERN is trying to open portals to talk to these guys, or.
Yeah. I mean, they
Um
already got the goddess Shiva out in front of their courtyard there.
yeah.
The
they do.
destroyer of worlds. Going back to what Renee said a minute ago about like when God forbids something and this doesn't really explain it. I think that has to do maybe with definitely what you said for sure. But I think the people that were getting the rules knew exactly what he was talking about when he
Yep.
was like
Yep.
saying, "Hey, look, don't go drinking blood and all this stuff." They I think in their minds they're like, "Okay, you remember that time we were all drinking blood and like, you know, we had the Nephilim and all that stuff was ruling over us." Yeah, like okay, that's what he's talking about. We shouldn't do witchcraft and open portals to other dimensions.
Dude, I was just thinking here. Have any of you guys actually like seen like any UFOs or know like family members
Oh,
who have
he's trying to
seen like
pull
random?
personal experiences out of us. I have.
Dude, you want to share about that? I'm actually very
Well,
interested
I've never
to
seen
hear.
like aliens or anything. I've seen weird things, like weird phenomena happen, and it's just like it was only a few times. I saw, I mean, things move in the house that I was in, just randomly like move. That was kind of weird. I did see when I was a teenager. I was walking. I walked everywhere when I was a teenager to get out the house. We were kicked out of the house till nighttime, but me and a buddy were walking to the mall, and we lived. Granted, we lived next to an Air Force base, so who knows what it was. But it looks like, like when you spin a coin on top of a table and it starts to wobble before it stops. So that wobbling movement, we saw something like that because we were walking and we saw something shining like in the sun. It was reflecting the sunlight. And so we looked, I mean, it was like way off toward like where the Air Force base was. There was like a shiny, wobbling look. It looked like a giant quarter, like in the sky. It was like a flat, disky looking thing, and it was wobbling like that. And it was every time it wobbled, it like reflected the sunlight off of it, and that's what made us see it. And then we watched it for a little while, and then it just went away.
Hmm.
That's the only thing I've ever seen that was like, okay, that doesn't look like anything I've seen before.
That's pretty odd.
So who knows?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I asked because I'm like, we're talking about aliens. I'm like, I
Yeah.
wonder if these guys have ever
I'm
seen
gonna
any
tell
like
you what it
weird.
was.
I
That's
think
the
the
Clockwork
only
Elves.
thing that I've actually, oh no, that I think I've only um, seen maybe I was like 16, 17 or something. I remember um, I was in the vehicle with my mom and we were driving somewhere and we were actually looking up at the sky, we were not too far off from a military base, interesting enough. But we did see this like triangle craft through kind of like the clouds and whatnot. So we can kind of see like the outline of it. The thing was like massive and whatnot. It was a very like I've never seen any plane really look like that. But again, after like speculating, I'm like, yeah, it was actually near like a military base. So who knows? And so
It was triangular, like a
that seems
stealth
that
bomber. It was like a giant triangle. You said, because I mean,
yes,
those are
but
being seen right now.
the thing was pretty massive.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I don't know how long it was actually like there for and whatnot, but when you look at it, it's definitely like, whoa, what is that thing?
You know what Alex Jones said on the Joe Rogan show? If you have not watched the Alex Jones episodes on Joe Rogan, they are like the best entertainment that you could ever watch
Gold.
in your life.
Oh
Don't
my
even watch
gosh.
movies, series. No, just watch Alex Jones on Joe Rogan. But Alex Jones, he's insane, but he's right a lot of the times. But one of the things he said that really stuck out to me on the Joe Rogan show, they were talking about aliens. He was talking about interdimensional beings and all this stuff. And he was saying how, and it connects to like the military and the government. It's like he was saying that we get our technology. It's Genesis 6 again. We get our technology that we have from interdimensional beings, is what he said. He called them. He's like things like CERN, things like he's like there are secret operations that the government and the military are doing. He said it's like high technology witchcraft, really. It's tapping into these beings that have great knowledge, and he's like, we're getting our cues from the other
Yeah.
side.
Well, let's talk about dimensions real quick. I want to clarify something here. This is something I spent some time reading about because I knew this was going to come up. But I think a lot of people, when you talk about interdimensional beings, because Tim Alberino picks on this a lot too.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they picture, in his words, Doctor Strange, like doing this
opening the
and
portal.
like the multiverse, and there's a bunch of Spider-Mans and there's a bunch of, whoever. I don't want people to get confused like that. That could be, I mean, maybe there are parallel dimensions, and if you step through, you'd be on a different planet. But a lot of times in that case, when they're talking like in quantum physics and theoretical physics and stuff like that, when they're talking about dimensions, they are talking, okay, like I happen to have a piece of paper right here. Okay.
Oh, dude, I thought you
y'all
was gonna have like a bar graph or something.
No. So this is a piece of stationery or like a notepad. So if you're not watching on video, I'll try to describe it for you. This is 2-dimensional, right? Okay. It has width and length. But if I push the ends together and it starts to bend like this, it's now going into a third dimension, right? That's height. Okay. So the question is, and maybe I can draw this. There's this funny.
I'm just saying that's not biblical, so I don't
He
subscribe
used
to
the
that.
Stranger Things analogy.
That's not
Yeah.
the Bible.
Yeah, the
You
Stranger Things.
heretic.
If I poke a hole in this piece of paper. So, but people that are listening to this in the car, maybe I'll just tell you, if you're holding a flat piece of paper, it's 2-dimensional. If I push the ends together and it starts to bow up, now it's going into a third dimension. Well, the idea is that the way I explain it, because like I have the understanding of a fifth grader on this probably, but we experience things in 3 dimensions: height, width, and length. So we can calculate distance that way in 3 dimensions. When they're talking about alternate dimensions, they're saying, just like I can bend or manipulate this piece of paper and it goes into another dimension, what does it
These
take to
beings can do
manipulate
that.
Right. And so you come
Well,
up
that's
with
how they say that's how they travel, is they bend
Yes.
gravity.
It made
and
me. So
work
gravity is a
through.
good example, because gravity, there's studies, and Einstein's theory of relativity talks about this, that time will operate differently at different gravity intensities, right? And so there's whole movies based on this. Go see Interstellar. But if I draw this cube, so there's actually what they call a 4-dimensional cube, and guess what it's called? It's called a tesseract. So, wonder where they got the idea. Yeah, this is what I'm drawing here is not a tesseract. I'm not going to try to draw it.
That's a piece
But
of ice.
all I drew was a cube. All I drew was a wireframe cube. So it's 8 squares. right? No, I'm sorry, it's 6 squares. I can't count. I'm trying to explain physics and I'm not able to count.
Like there's like numbers in it and stuff.
So here's the thing about this wireframe cube is you can't tell which side is the front and the back, right? So try this at home, folks. Draw 2 squares
Come on, kids.
offset and connect the corners. So is this the front or is this the front?
Yeah, we don't know.
And I saw this as a demonstration one time when someone was trying to explain 4 dimensions. They were saying, you in your mind can flex this cube, right? I can make this corner the front or I can make this corner the front.
Right.
If something operates in a 4th dimension, it's, it's like that. It's not bound by height, width, and, the way that we think of it.
Yeah, well, like God can bend those rules, and that's what miracles are.
Right, which
basically.
is why exactly, and that's why I say to critics, like I said, atheists, or even when we're trying to explain the Trinity. Last time we had Avery on talking about Islam and defending the Trinity, and it's like, how do you expect me to explain something that doesn't make sense? And
Right.
and it's higher than our understanding.
Right.
So
it's in the 4th dimension.
Yeah, and then there's you can go YouTube this, go look up flat world. This is how they explain dimensions too. Do y'all know what flat world is?
No, but I think it's like flat Earth, right?
Yes. Well, the idea is that
Oh,
if if there was a person living on this piece of paper, he would be 2-dimensional. Okay, my smiley face is upside down, and if I touched this piece of paper, I would be represented as a dot. Only the part that's coming in contact with this piece of paper, right?
Right.
So he could not perceive the height of my hand, say.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
So
would just
I thought of
the circle of your finger.
Right. So think about a 4th dimensional object passing through 3-dimensional space. I'm blowing everybody's minds right now. Keep up with me. I know this is crazy. But when Josh said that the object was wobbling like this, I pictured this long cylindrical thing. What would it look like if it was passing through 3-dimensional space? You would only see 3 dimensions of it at a time.
Right.
So that would, maybe
what
cause an
people
optical
are-
illusion of movement.
Right. What people are seeing is they're not perceiving it the way it really is.
Or like
you
these
know
Tic Tac.
who else talks about that kind of stuff is he's crazy
Ezekiel.
too. Is
Ezekiel.
The wheels.
I know.
There
I
you
just
go.
hogged all that time explaining
Yeah.
physics. That's not what we're here for. So.
No, that was good though. It's good stuff. It all connects together. But David Icke. Now,
Yeah.
David Icke he's a weird one. He's out there, but he's got some other stuff I think he's tapping into the truth. He just doesn't quite know how to like Christianese it,
Yeah.
But he talks about, he's like, there are these interdimensional beings, and they live in a 4th dimension that we cannot see. He's like, and he goes through the like wavelength of like light and how our eyes can only see certain prisms of light. He's like, but there's other things outside of that light that our eyes can't see. And he's like, that's where they are. He's like, we cannot see them. And it's like, dude, that's wild.
That's terrifying.
That's good. I'm actually glad y'all talked about the 4th dimension type stuff, or like the different realities and dimensions. Because I remember
Renee's gonna bring up an altar call.
Class.
This is his 4th dimensional altar call.
No, I remember I was in we was in Bible college, and we was talking about 2 different instances in the Bible where I think it was Elijah, someone correct me, or Elisha, where they were praying to the king, and Elijah or Elisha saw the army of the Lord surrounding the other army, but the king didn't see it.
Elijah.
Right.
Till they prayed again. Right? It was Elijah?
Elisha.
Okay, yeah. So he prayed again for the king, and then the king was able to see the Lord's army surrounding the enemy's army. And my professor just asked, he just said, do you think when Elijah prayed for him again, do you think his eyes were open to the 4th dimension, like to the spiritual realm where God is at? And we're like, man, that's a good question. And then we thought about this. We were talking about Adam and Eve and how they used to walk in the cool of the garden with the Lord, right? And so they sinned, and the Lord came, looking for them, and now it says their eyes were open. Then he asked again, do you think sin is what separated human beings from living in the 4th dimension where God is really at?
Right.
Because because part of the Greek word of sin is a separation. It's a missed mark, right?
Yeah.
So like we can even see like this when Jesus comes. Whenever we place our faith in Jesus, our spirit gets justified, right? So that's one thing that was fallen gets redeemed. Then our soul, mind, will, and emotions get sanctified, which is another thing that was lost to sin, and then our bodies get glorified, right? Which, we don't really understand that part, but anyways, like Jesus comes to redeem everything that sin took away. So even the same thing, like with the heavens, right? When the Bible talks about the heavens, and then when we get to go to heaven, like Jesus says, he prepared a place for us. So anyways, it has got me thinking, man, like, could sin be the thing that has separated us completely from seeing everything that God has created in its original entirety, right? In its an original form before sin came. Because again, I just think about, Adam and Eve walking in the cool of the garden, and then Elijah seeing the Lord's army surrounding the enemy's armies. Because obviously, that enemy army did not see the Lord's army. They didn't see it. But Elijah and the king did once they prayed. And it just kind
Great
of makes me think, I'm
speculation.
like, that was a time of where maybe like those dimensions crossed and the Lord opened the eyes and said, you know what, this is a reality that your natural eyes can't see because of
Yeah,
sin.
I definitely think, and I definitely think there's something to that. And again, that's why I like discussing this stuff, because uh, I'm gonna pick on atheists again. Feel free to DM or email us if y'all have feedback for what I'm about to say. But
Yeah, please DM them, not me.
not
I'm
Rene.
messing.
But I think that they question the existence of a creator, of any sort of God, any sort of spiritual being, any sort of out of body experience, whatever. But when the next scientific discovery comes out that they're, oh, we found, like when they found the Higgs boson particle, and oh, there's different energy fields and different particles and different dimensions and whatever, they jump on that stuff, like oh, this is science, this is science. So you're willing to accept that there's a fourth dimension that we can't interact with, and there are even particles that don't interact with the Higgs field, that this energy field that we live in. Another science term, we can talk about that another day. But you're willing to accept that there's another dimension that we can't see and can't operate in, and there's even things that we can measure that don't interact with where we are. But you're not willing to accept that there might be beings that maybe exist in that field or in that dimension. I
They
mean,
can't
that's
they can't even explain where consciousness comes from. How are you
right,
conscious right now?
right,
How are you able to reason and think? I don't
right.
Evolution.
And
We
maybe
evolved
this
that way.
idea, yeah, maybe this idea of consciousness or a spirit, or like you were saying, sin. um I've heard, I would recommend everybody, we talked about the Lord of Spirits podcast before. They have 2 whole episodes where they talk about what is a body, like, does God have a body, what is a human body, what is an angel body. And the way they explain it, it sounds like a silly subject, but you need to hear the way they
It's
explain
very
it.
good.
But think about this. The Bible says that when Adam and Eve sinned, he gave them garments of skin. And so
He
what if
did.
what if they were they what if Adam and Eve were beings that operated in, let's just say, another dimension, or had access to something that we don't have now because of our flesh, right?
Heavenly realm.
Because of our sin. So when he put on garments of skin, their body, their essence, whatever makes up humans, was limited and was cut off from that spiritual dimension, that spiritual realm. And I also expect a lot of people to say that sounds like New Age or Gnosticism or whatever. I'm just speculating here. I'm trying to say there are things in science we've observed and things in the Bible that we can't explain. I don't see why there's not a possibility that these two things can connect.
Yeah, it never
Uh,
did say that he killed an animal
right? It doesn't have to
and
be a literal
clothed
like
them with
sheepskin.
animal skins. Like it just said he clothed them with skins.
Right. So there's something about human nature that changed when they were cut off from God, right?
Very much.
So there are people that believe that. I think that, I'll be honest, I think when we discussed that topic, I kind of shot that idea down, but I've looked into it since then, and it it's a little more appealing to me
It's
now.
plausible. What do you think about like science fiction? Okay, so I love science fiction, like movies, and I love Alien. One of my favorite movies of all time is Alien. From Ridley Scott. Um, where do you think people get these ideas from? We talked about C.S. Lewis and Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, and where did they get these ideas, these fanciful science fiction, fantasy? Like, where does that come from? I think it's embedded in the heart of man. I think it's thinking back to what we used to be
Would you
and what we're
consider yourself a
connected
Jungian?
what we're connected to. No, not at all. But what's that scripture in where it says that God put eternity in the heart of man?
Yeah,
I think that's it. Yeah,
Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes.
Yeah,
Solomon said that,
Ecclesiastes. Yeah.
and I think it goes along with that. It just makes me think like the alien stuff, the technology stuff, the ethereal fantasy technology. Like, is that an echo in ourselves of what it used to be?
I think that that's like what we were talking about earlier about the CIA. Maybe I think some of this is real stuff that exists. I'll say top secret, undercover, that maybe is being fed to media. Whether that's journalists, Hollywood, music, whatever, to program people or to prepare us mentally for the next breakthrough. And then some of it can be occult because we know there's occult ties in Hollywood, and so they could be experiencing things and
What?
saying, "How do I put this in an interesting movie?"
Yeah. How can we
So
drink each
And
other's
I
blood?
do
that's
want to
one of those
say
things where it can be multiple different answers, but I think we've addressed those too
no, no.
already, and they connect with that.
I agree. I agree. And one of the things I want to talk about, like the whole government thing. I know at one time I was kind of like, oh, I thought the government was good. Like, at a younger age, right? I was just everything that the government did was good for us and so forth. And it kind of when 2020 hit, I was kind of like, I can see why our founding fathers did what they did with the Constitution and the Declaration. People in government are not always good. So now I'm thinking about like because the Bible says we're all sinners and we're all fallen, right? There are godless people in politics. There are godless people who are in leadership. There are godless people doing that has influence on all these things. What's to say that godless people won't do godless things? So I don't even put it past where our government and other governments are conspiring to do something evil and nefarious because, bro, like David says, we came out the womb sinners. So we have a fallen, decaying nature already. So who's to say that there's not an evil plot, right? Just like what Solomon said, nothing is new under the sun. Just what happened in the days of Noah is going to happen again because that's what Jesus said is going to happen before the end is here. So, man, I'm also with people who say, it's government conspiracies. They're trying to hide something or do all of this. Man, hey, I'm with you because, again, I'm not saying everybody in government is evil, but I'm saying that I don't put it past evil people doing evil things like that. You know,
Yeah. So
Most
our
definitely. Well, they're all drinking each other's blood and messing with kids, bro. Of course,
bro, the kids thing is ridiculous. I did notice that this congressional hearing with what's his name,
Grush.
Grush. I almost said Bush, and I was like, that's not it, Grush.
Yeah, him too. He's a lizard
Yeah.
man too.
Hey man, but this did come out the week after Sound of Freedom was killing it in the box office. So
Do you think it
Yo,
was
dude,
maybe like a smokescreen or
I
like,
don't know if it's trying to throw
hey,
people off the trail
we
or
would
if it's
rather blow the cover on our alien project than blow the
than
cover
human
on our
trafficking.
children project. Yeah.
I think that's
it
part
is
of
tr-
it.
it is very interesting. I read this comment not too long ago on Instagram. I don't even remember what exactly the video was, but I screenshot the comment. I thought it was very interesting. They said, "Isn't it funny how just when everyone was talking about human trafficking and pedophilia, the government says aliens and UFOs are real. Don't lose focus."
It is a weird and unique time because it makes me even think about, again, this is just speculation, but it makes me even think about when the whole Titanic submarine thing went down to see the Titanic. Behind the scenes, our government, the FDA, passed lab grown meat that can be sold now
Yeah.
in stores and
Yep.
restaurants in California are now going to start. So again, it doesn't. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just thinking about that. It doesn't put it past me that something
Yeah.
like that can happen because I'm even thinking about the Cash App thing, right? Cash App. I mean, our government wanted to pass Fed now. Cash App founder didn't want to do it, and then later they found him dead in San Francisco. Stabbed and like on drugs or something. I think
He
that's what they
got
said,
he
right? He
got
was
he got Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So and it was crazy because there was no record of him even having issues with drugs, but he just something happened. So now so anyways, it doesn't put it past me. Again, going back to the godless thing, godless people would do godless things. Godless people don't fear God. because Proverbs says it's the fear of the Lord that keeps us away from evil. If you don't believe in God and you don't fear God, you'll do anything because you don't care. So yeah,
And dude, and this is the whole, I think, just it's been the biblical narrative, I think, Josh reminded, which you guys have been talking about all along on the podcast, is just we're in a spiritual war. I mean, and evil people, like you said, Renee, are going to do evil things. Like how I think about how Saul got a medium to conjure up Samuel's spirit because he's curious and he wanted answers. It's like people are going to do evil things, and there's going to be a demonic response naturally to those things. And so it's really just what side are you on? What are you standing for? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and what I've been telling myself too is whether the government is using this as a smokescreen, or if this is a psyop, if they're getting ready for something else. It doesn't mean aliens are or are not real. It just means the government has an agenda, or that corporations have an agenda. And so, you know, as people, as you're going through these issues in your head and with your acquaintances and friends and stuff, keep that in mind, that that's really two different things. The government has its thing, corporations
it's
have
true.
their thing, Hollywood has its
Corporations,
thing. Aliens could be a whole different thing,
A
yeah,
whole new
yeah.
a whole new
They
corporation.
no, that's true. They can have their own agenda because even I'm probably gonna butcher this, but for just from my limited knowledge of what I remember, like even the word fascism, fascism has been a coined thing because of what happened in the 20th century with Mussolini, right? But also, fascism, I believe, in its original intent was actually talking about military corporations rising to power and influencing politics. Like our founding fathers kind of talk about those different things. So again, it doesn't put it past me, you know, that corporations, like you say, big tech, little tech, whatever tech, military, like just throwing all the stuff. It doesn't put it past me that they would use their influence, their money, and things like that to push an agenda because it's like, dude, they they want something, they're gonna get it. Like people already know this phrase: once you go woke, you go broke. But obviously, companies are still doing it because the agenda to them is more important than their money. Their agenda that they're
yeah.
pushing, the worldview that they want people to adopt, is more important than their money. So
And
I'm just throwing some
that's
stuff
their
out there, but
end
yeah,
goal is propaganda, manipulation, cultural shift to where
and dude, how evil is that too? Because I remember Renee, we were having that conversation not too long ago. And I was just thinking about how originally my thought process was, money is just going to triumph over everything in a sense where all these companies, organizations, they're all run by money. Their main goal is money. They want
Yay,
money.
capitalism.
So,
oh
so,
my
but if
god.
they see, if, but if
I'm
they
kidding.
see
I'm kidding.
something, like Sound of Freedom that comes out and, in the time it's been out, it's received over 100 million in profit and whatnot. Maybe these companies are going to start gravitating towards, what, because these other movies with these, like, they're actually coming out with these topics that we wouldn't think that people want to see, but they do, and it ends up being a really good agenda. It's something that we should know about, sex trafficking and those type of things. But honestly, my whole thought process is still, yeah, the agenda, I think, will still override a lot of these things, like the evil, like, agenda.
It reigns supreme. Look at Disney. Disney is a prime example of this, which I
Yeah,
think Disney passed on this movie, right? The Sound of Freedom. Um,
Yeah, I have something to say about that too.
yeah, I don't know the specifics of that, but if you look at Disney over the past few years, they have lost billions, with a B,
yeah.
billions of dollars pushing narratives and agendas instead of trying to make profit. And it's been year after year after year. It's getting worse and worse and worse, almost to the point to where they're in talks of selling Disney to Apple, maybe. But it's like what makes a corporation just take a L after L after L and not change whatsoever? They're like, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. Like that's insanity. That tells me they're not worried so much about money. Maybe they were at one time, but I think there's been a cultural shift to where money's not really the point anymore. Yeah, we'll take it if we get it, but
Well, think
there's
about the
this
elites too. Like,
indoctrination.
there's, I think, people, like really evil people who have a lot of money who are funding these things secretly when other
Right.
organizations can't get the money. So we really don't know, but
Yeah. So, and I'll add this too, because we've been saying like, oh, they should be going where the money is. But if the tinfoil hat conspiracy, whatever is true, that I can't even say that because it's not a conspiracy theory. It is true that there are
Yeah, it
pedophiles in
is.
Hollywood,
Exactly.
but the real money is in trafficking kids. So you might say, well,
That's right.
why would they
True.
release? Why wouldn't they release Sound of Freedom if it was going to be a big hit? Well, because they make more money trafficking kids.
On the Sean Ryan podcast, he did a 3-part series about aliens, and one of the guys, I forgot which one, but he said, the three most profitable businesses in the world is first is human trafficking, then it's drugs, and then it's war, weapons. And and it's true because yes, Sound of Freedom is making a lot of money, but they're making more money trafficking people. They're making more money letting China send drugs across the border. They're making money prolonging. Just throws out here. I don't think it's a conspiracy, but they're making more money prolonging this war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, all the listeners, y'all can stone me for that. But anyways,
No,
just throwing
no,
that
no.
out there.
Our listeners are cool.
Good, thank God.
What
But
do you
it's
think?
all
Do you think the alien thing connects to human trafficking? Because I know
yeah.
there's stories and
Josh
there's
is getting us back on track here.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to connect it to the alien thing too, because there's stories of women being impregnated by alien technology, and then they're pregnant, and they don't know how they got pregnant, and then the baby is taken.
Yeah, which we as we've already said, you could probably explain that 3 different ways. They're making it
Sure,
up. It was demonic. It's not
but it's
true.
like,
Blah, blah.
why?
But if
Why
people
is
are
there
really
a
having this
baby,
experience, yeah,
and then the baby is then taken? That
yeah,
seems strange,
yeah, man.
like a
Well,
harvesting
wait.
kind of thing,
Now,
you know?
Renee, you've mentioned before. I think it was Tim Ballard in an interview talked about where these traffickers are harvesting. I know this is very gruesome. I apologize to everybody, but they're harvesting
Harvesting.
organs from kids, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's
Don't
kids
they?
factories. Yeah,
that's what
that's what Tim
abortion
Ballard was
is.
saying. Yeah,
That's why we
Yeah,
push
I
abortion
Planned
agree.
so much.
Parenthood.
I was about to say.
I
Yep.
agree.
We've been doing that
And
forever.
just talking about the human trafficking thing, I actually pulled up the episode, so in case anybody that's listening or watching, they want to go listen to what I'm about to say. So if you go to the Sean Ryan episode number 66 with the U.S. Marine, he talks about his encounter with a UFO and Men in Black, and how he saw a craft, and then he saw like 4 or 5 C boxes or Connex boxes being loaded into this aircraft, and and he says this in his podcast that he didn't know what they were loading into the to the aircraft or whatever, like spaceship, whatever it was. But after a while he met with Stephen Greer, who's been like the UFO guy that's kind of like helping people and the whistleblowers and so forth.
Yeah, we got a
And
story
again,
about
guys,
him.
I'm just gonna throw this out here. I'm not saying I agree with everything, and with Stephen Greer or whatever, I'm just throwing his name out there. But he did say that those things, I mean, the Connex boxes that you saw was hosting humans, because what's like, there's no better way to to traffic human beings whenever a natural disaster hits, because that's what the Marine was responding to in Indonesia to an earthquake or a tsunami in '09. He's like, that's the best prime place to traffic people, because people go missing during natural disasters all the time. So who's to say like a couple hundred people just don't go missing, So anyways, I'm just throwing that out here. I know that's kind
Yeah.
of like a huge speculation and people might deny it, but again, I say it's possible because godless people would do godless things.
Why do you think a certain political party wants open borders? If you have open borders and you don't track humans coming through the border, they can wind up missing and nobody would ever know they were gone.
I was just going to mention that
And
because
that's happening now.
like a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, there was a hearing where I can't remember the woman's name. I can find it real quick, but she said that she experienced this where the kids, they're coming in, there's no documentation, and they're being sent to basically sponsors or foster, parents with no checks or anything, and these kids just tend to disappear.
Yeah.
And so yeah, to circle back to your question, Josh, I think that the alien thing could be connected. Now, I don't know if they're harvesting organs for research and science, whether they're creating bodies, because we never finished the drone question earlier.
Yeah.
Whether they're creating bodies, whether they're trying to clone humans, and maybe have some hybrids or something. I don't know what their motivation would be for having human bodies or body parts.
Well,
One can only speculate.
I just recently heard one guy say, this is on that Ancient of Days conference, where he said that the cloning, the bodies, and all that stuff is going to be the dragon's army at the end of the age. That when the spirits, the scorpion spirits in Revelation, are released from the bottomless pit, they're going to go and inhabit those bodies, and there's going to be a war, a kinetic war. It's
So
it
so
sounds
that's like
wild,
clone
but
troopers in Star Wars.
They're
it's
making an
Just
army.
basically
people.
clone troopers. Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
Like
maybe that was
building
predictive programming, right? They're
exactly. It's
telling
like,
us
where did he get the idea of that? But yeah, it's like there's going to be a battle, and it's not going to be a
That's so true.
ethereal, shooting light rays at each other. It's going to be a physical battle. Doesn't Revelation say like the blood is going to like rise to the horse's bridle? Like it's
Revelation
going to
12
be.
starts the war. Yeah. Yeah.
What did Alberino say about like even like our bodies being like technologically enhanced so much to where we won't die? And he was saying like, you
Oh,
remember
like
that?
death won't escape
Yeah, he's like
in Revelation. Just talks about that.
they will
Yeah,
desire
long to
death, and
death,
they
Long
won't be
to
able to.
die.
not
Yeah,
find it.
they won't be able
Yeah.
to. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
terrifying.
And I don't put it past too, like what you're saying about the whole bodies and everything, because our military, especially all militaries around the world, but our military is always big on these super soldier programs or like the
Oh yeah,
future soldier programs,
that's what
right?
the
Like
Nazis were
let's
doing.
keep advancing.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is that's one of those things that has been in treaties before where they're like, yeah, we all agree not to do this, right? Right? And you've got
Right?
China and Russia. China's doing it right now. They have super
Yeah,
soldiers. So,
We can't militarize Antarctica, right?
yeah.
But we
yeah,
over there militarizing it.
Right.
bro.
I did hear something in that hearing with Grush that they were saying, and maybe I misunderstood, but I believe they said that there is a treaty in the UN, or there's a clause or something that explains that if there were extraterrestrials, that nations couldn't escalate uh, tensions, or I don't know how
That
he said it.
we'd have to band together to
Right.
fight the
Well, it,
alien
it
threat.
made me think, if anyone's familiar with the book Ender's Game or the movie wasn't great, but the book is awesome. But essentially, there's a one world government, and all the humans team up to fight an alien invasion. That's the basic premise of the book, and it's really interesting because it talks about the military side of it, where these people are going to fight the aliens, but it talks about back on Earth all the political moves that are going on. It's pretty interesting, but that immediately made me thought, again, aliens don't even have to be real for this to be a thing.
True.
They could just be planting that idea, and they just have to make people think there's an alien threat.
Wow.
And then they have to say, man, America and China have never gotten along, but now we need to team up to
Yep.
fight these aliens,
Yeah, and you need to eat bugs while we live in the clouds. What
Right.
do you think? What do you think about like? What do you think what if the alien narrative is they're trying to backfire it on like when Jesus comes back?
I've heard
Like
that too.
Jesus is not Jesus, he's an alien, and we need to fight him, and all the nations of the earth need to rally together and fight against this alien threat.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple different ways. I've heard that
Same here.
now, of course, you have to be a pre-trib dispensationalist or whatever to believe this, but I heard one guy say the rapture, that they're going to explain that as an alien abduction.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
heard
we'll
that
have to
too.
talk about end time views one day and explain
Yeah.
all those. So
Preterism.
yeah. To be clear though, you're not a preterist. Just tell everybody now.
No, partial preterists.
Okay.
Partial preterists.
But anyway, they were saying the rapture was going to be aliens. The witnesses, the two witnesses that are mowing people down with flamethrowers,
Bruh.
they're going to be
aliens.
aliens.
Apache
Jesus is an
helicopters.
alien.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
And we need to
I
fight
agree.
against
I
them.
just think, Satan, obviously the God of this world, Satan wants to rule, and he knows he's not, because he already knows the end. But that's the point of deception. A lie is just not telling someone the truth. Deception is making someone think the lie is true.
Right.
And
Mhm.
that's why I think about like the whole UFO thing. Like let's just say they're not real, and our government is just using this to get people to come together, so that, because it's like a new Tower of Babel. That's exactly what the Tower of Babel did. Like there's
Exactly.
nothing wrong with
Yep.
unity. There's nothing wrong with unity, but what the people in the Tower of Babel were doing, they had unity without God, and they wanted to build the tower to reach heaven because Nimrod wanted to, fight against God and say, you're not going to drown us again. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's,
Yes,
it's,
exactly.
it's like what Mark Driscoll said. He said, he was talking about abortion and all the demons like Moloch, but he said, look, they're same demons. They just have different names. It's the same playbook. It just has a different name.
Yeah, Josh, this would be a good time to mention your conversation with Guy Malone. He was saying that things that were called fairies and
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
dwarves or whatever back
Right.
in.
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit about that on our Halloween episode. Like, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
these fairies and nymphs and mythical beasts and creatures, like, there's validity to that stuff. And it's not that they're fairies and imps and creatures, from folklore. They're really spirits and Nephilim spirits or demons or whatever, these other sons of God. And there's a lot more of this stuff that's real that we think is just folklore. That's why I love that movie Onward. Have y'all seen Onward?
Yes.
That's one Disney movie that they did really good on. It was this whole idea of, like, these magical creatures like elves and fairies and all this stuff. They forget their past and they forget magic, and they start living like modern lives, like drinking coffee and like going to work and like all this stuff.
Oh
And it's like
man.
they forget the magic that's real, in the world. And I think we're a lot like that. We forget our true
Yeah.
story and our true history and how fantastic it really is, because we're so modernized. And I think that's right where the devil wants us. That's right where the dark side wants us, not to believe in the fantastic and to forget our history. Because if we know our history, we know who we are and where we come from. But if all that's mangled and it's just myth, it's story, it's not real, gods didn't exist and all that stuff, well, then that disconnects us from our true identity.
That's true. Because even like the whole mythology type deal, it just that word in itself tries to separate you from the supernatural. And it's like, man, there is a supernatural. So yeah, I totally agree, man.
And
That's good
language too,
thought. Good
even
thought.
that word myth, they've changed the
Yep.
meaning of myth to say, oh, well, it's not real. Well, that's not what myth means. Myth means it's a story that has to do with divine beings. It's a narrative of divine things.
And that's like Derek Gilbert, who's talked with us, the
Bro,
psyop, Satan
Derek's
psyop,
legit. Yeah.
you know, um, about all the nations having their own mythology, and you could even connect it to modern times where we have science,
Yeah.
like on
Yeah.
Nacho Libre.
Science.
But yeah, man, I mean, some things just can't be explained, and people are forever going to try to find a name for it, but that doesn't change what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's true.
yeah, man.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Well,
That's facts.
let's do. I can think of several things where we were like, oh, I have something to add to that, and we didn't come back to it. So maybe we'll do some shorts or something. But let's just do some final thoughts real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
We did some very encouraging Christian messaging up at the front, but let's close with some stuff like final thoughts. I don't know who wants to go first, but somebody
Like
send
if you
us.
ain't saved type stuff.
not not an altar call,
Doesn't have to be an
Pastor
altar
Boy.
call.
Altar call.
But just again, we've been talking about should Christians believe in aliens? Is it okay to believe in aliens as a Christian? And what are aliens? What would be the biblical view? Which we didn't even really talk about Bible scriptures. We did address that, like, there are statements in the Bible that are absolute. Like another one that I thought of was in Colossians when it talks about Christ as the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And it says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So there are absolute statements like that in the Bible that, if aliens are real, they fall under those categories.
Yeah.
They're in
God
heaven
made
and
them.
earth,
Yep.
heaven and earth, visible, invisible, thrones, dominions, rulers,
Yep.
authorities. If they're created, they're created through him and for him, which means ultimately he has authority over them. And
I agree.
this just goes out, if anybody's listening, that whether you're saved or not, whether you follow Christ or not, one day you know, he's going to come back and the story's going to be over, and people on his side, you know, are going to go with him, and people that are not are going to go into eternal darkness, you know, or torment. And we can talk about hell another time, you know, whether it's annihilation or eternal torment, but
Annihilation.
but I'm just
No,
saying,
it's
you know,
true.
it's going to happen one day. And as C.S. Lewis has said, like, you know, when the author of the play steps on the stage, the play is over, you know. And so that
Wow.
whether it's an alien ruse or whatever that the government creates, one day Jesus is going to step on the stage and shut it down, and that's going to be it.
And
So
we're on his team, so we don't have to worry.
yeah,
That's
Yes.
so
correct.
that's my
I
final
was gonna
thought. I'll let
say,
y'all add.
no, dude, I love that. I'm gonna let you kind of keep that, man. That's encouraging. I just think, ultimately, man, this conversation is not meant to scare anyone. Obviously, these are speculations. But again, the verse, I think, another verse that goes through my mind is that, you know, you're not going to fear the arrow by day or the terrors by night. Ultimately, like we're talking about right now, we're on God's side. We don't have to be afraid. Yeah, there's some weird things out there, no question, and we don't know what these things are, and that's okay. I think it's interesting to have these questions and just to, it's encouraging to actually have believers come together and discuss these things. And Renee, you mentioned this before. It's you know, these things aren't hills to die on or anything. We all know that we're in Christ, and that's the most important thing. And so, thank you all so much for uh, having us on this conversation. It was great.
Thank you, Luke. Let's all take up an offering for Luke.
He's the apostle. You know, I would say like one of the final thoughts, man. I think, you know, for those who are listening and watching, this, just like what Luke said, it shouldn't draw you away from God. You know, it actually should pull you in because, you know, everything is created by him and through him. You know, just like what Paul says too, like how everything is created. Like he quotes that philosopher, you know, like that Greek philosopher that I
In
forgot
him we
names.
live and move and have our being.
Yes,
We are
yes, in
his
him we move
offspring.
and have. Yes, so it's just overall, it's like, man, God is King, Jesus is Lord. You know, there's no one higher than him because he says he's the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Like he's all of it. And man, I think this conversation in general, man, helped me because I love the idea. Again, just going back that we get to have a conversation, we get to dialogue about this stuff, we get to present ideas, and I think, you know, if Christians are watching this and whoever, if they don't get anything else, they they should just get this, that we need a dialogue with one another. We need to be bold and have confidence to have conversations and not be afraid of, you know, what what might happen and so forth, because this here is what builds unity. This here brings clarity because, man, these are godly conversations. You know, it's given us an opportunity to see things through a biblical lens and help us draw closer to God. So overall, man, I love the conversations. I love the dialogue, which, you know me, man, I'm not afraid from, you know, I'm not afraid of having conversations with people. I'm okay with it. I want to express the truth. I want to share some insight and wisdom, but I'm also willing to learn. So, man, thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed listening to both, you know, Josh and Ryan and Luke, and just sharing their insights because it helped me kind of like process some other stuff too and give me some other things to consider and pray and think about, you know. But overall, man, this whole conversation and all the aliens and UFOs, it does not shake my faith at all. Again, it actually gives me more confidence and more awe of God because the mysteries of God are there. And it's like, God, my finite being can't understand the infinite God. So this builds my faith. It excites me. And I just know that, man, my God is King, Yahweh is Lord, and, you know, like, they do exist. He created them and he's Lord of all. So yeah.
I just want to throw this on real quick because I always try to give some practical input. And so y'all just both kind of said like people shouldn't be afraid of talking about stuff like this, or, you know, oh, I'm afraid if aliens are real, or, you know, the government's trying to take over, whatever. People a lot of times are afraid because they say, I don't know what to do about it. What do we do? What can we do? I think that the simple answer is the Great Commission. Okay. And I try to bring this up on every episode. And again, this is why we do episodes like when we had Avery on to talk about Islam. And we're going to have more apologetics themed episodes. But share the gospel with people. Jesus said, I have all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, so heaven and earth, right? All encompassing. He has all authority. So what does he tell us to do? Not go build ray guns and fight aliens. He says, go and share the gospel, go win souls and make disciples and teach them to follow all my commandments. So um, that's why, Josh and I love talking about the conspiracies and the philosophy and the weird things, and the mythology, all the ologies. But the most practical thing anybody can do is share the gospel with people. And so don't be afraid, be encouraged. I hope I didn't steal your thunder, Josh. I hope that's not exactly word for word what you were going to say.
No, not
But
at all.
I had to get that in there. That's something that I try to do every episode. So
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you guys all have a great perspective, and that's why we invited all these guys on. And I think I would say broaden your perspective. The Bible talks about. Paul tells us that that we're to go on to maturity, and that we're not supposed to stay, infants in our faith, because a full-grown man in a diaper is not pleasant. So let's push a little harder and a little further into our faith. Let's open our minds up a little bit more. I think we're so close-minded as Christians sometimes that we cause a lot of harm and disunity for no reason, really. Just because we think our way of thinking about a topic is the right way, and there could possibly be no other way to think about this topic. Now, of course, like we said before, there are definitely closed-fisted things that we do not discuss or debate. That's Orthodox Christian doctrine. All this other stuff is up, man. That's freedom that we have as free creatures to think and speculate about things like this that are just wild and out there. And it's really fun. It's really fun to be a Christian because we're the ones that have total freedom, and we know who we are, where we come from, and we can speculate about all this stuff and not be scared and not be frightened and not feel threatened, or it's fine. Whatever comes my way, whether it be aliens or the government or hell itself, bring it on. Doesn't bother me. Like the battle is raging, but the war is already done. It's already over. We're already winners. So we're just playing this thing out, and supposed to be doing what we're supposed to be doing, sharing the gospel, like you said. But man, broaden your paradigm. Don't let something that could crush your faith, like an alien presence, or an alien thing. Like, don't let that crush your faith. It should help and not destroy you.
that's good.
Hopefully, y'all enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun.
It's the longest episode we've had in a while. I may have to
Absolutely,
trim
it's
it
great.
down. We'll see.
Blast though.
Well, on that note, guys, we'll let y'all go. Josh and I really appreciate y'all being on, and so and we'll give everybody we'll post y'all's social.
This was fun. We talked about aliens, but we kind of talked about a bunch of stuff. Brought it back to the Bible and the gospel. Very good.
Well, on that note, we'll let y'all go.
Peace be with you.
Thank you.